Hello, my name is Patrik Drean. I am presenting for the IS 542 class, and I will be focusing on JavaScript testing, specifically with the testing framework QUnit. Today, I'm going to specifically talk about test-driven development, just give a quick overview about that, just mention some of the other testing frameworks that are available and some pros and cons. And we'll actually look in QUnit and do some demoing of it to show you what it can do and give you a first look at that. So first off, looking at test-driven development, what it is, it's a very common methodology used in the agile world right now. The bottom line is it's writing your test first to produce higher quality of code. So the process is a little bit different than what we're accustomed to. Instead of writing the code first, you write the test first, and then you run and fail that test, and then you write the code that will be appropriate to actually make the test pass. And once the test is passed, then you'll go back and refactor your code. And then you'll just repeat that process, and in each iteration, you'll refactor the code so that everything is looking good. So now that we've looked into why we would want to use a testing framework and this new methodology of test-driven development, you have a lot of different frameworks available here. We have split up the client-side ones that just work in the browser in comparison to the Node.js ones that work on the back end, and also we have lots of frameworks that will do both. As you can see, QUnit actually is able to do both the browser and the back end, and we have several that can do the same thing. To specifically point out some of the big rivals to QUnit, we have Jasmine and Mocha. I've seen a lot of hype about them. They are newer frameworks that are very robust. I've seen that they do a really good job at testing asynchronous JavaScript, which is a downside to QUnit. It's not as adept for those types of situations, but you have your pros and cons. A lot of these frameworks are newer, and so there's not as a lot of support. But the majority of those frameworks in the both category are open source, and so there is a pretty big community around them. So specifically the features I wanted to point out with QUnit, like I said, it works both in the browser and the back end. It is very stable because it's been out for several years now at this point. And it was actually created by jQuery. And so because of that, it integrates really well with jQuery, which is in a lot of projects. And so that could be very beneficial to you and your projects as well. Now we're going to jump into a demo with QUnit just so you have an idea of how it works. And I have here an arbitrary example where we have a form, and the idea is we want to create an address cleaner. So what I would want to happen is I put in an address such as this one, and I want to remove the decimals and capitalize any of the directional letters. So for example, I would want to turn this string into something more like this, where we remove the decimals if they're there, and we capitalize any of these directional navigational letters. And this is just an arbitrary example where maybe we'll want to have I don't know, standardized addresses or something of that nature. So again, it's just a simple form. Let me show you the project structure here. We have this HTML page that I was just showing you with the associated CSS to style it. And then we'll have the JavaScript that will actually handle the different functions to remove the periods and to make the changes that we need to. And then here is the actual HTML page that imports QUnit into our project so that we are able to make the tests and such. So this highlighted portion is just the CSS to allow us to see the web page styling. These are just divs that will be altered by the JavaScript for QUnit. And this is the meat of the actual framework that's being imported through the CDN. And then this is the import statement for our JavaScript so that we can test it to make sure that everything's looking okay. So again, we are importing this JavaScript file in the actual project, but also in our test.html so that we can run the functions and make sure that they're looking okay. Now this is just a very basic test to get us used to what the syntax looks like. It's pretty straightforward. You just call QUnit.test, and that starts a standalone test. The first parameter is the name of the test that will be shown in your HTML page, and then it's past a closure, which will actually use the assert object to make different assertions. In this case, we're just going to use the most simple one, which is .ok. And the only thing it's checking is to see if what we are passing here is true or not. Now, as address.return true is from our JavaScript file, just as the kind of the home base for our file, we have the variable address. And right now, all it has is just a basic function that's called return true. And it's pretty straightforward, just returns the Boolean value true, just so we can get started off nice and easy. And so again, what's going to happen is back here in this test file, it's looking to see if this is true, and this function does return true, so it should run okay. So we'll hop over to our test.html. Again, this is just in my project, and this is what it looks like. And so when you reload the page, it'll run the tests. And if you don't see anything, that's a good sign. Here's that test called simple truthy test that I named prior. It just says okay, so we know we passed it. More of a real life scenario. I've already put together this test just for time's sake here, but it's pretty straightforward. Again, here's the name, check for removed periods. So we're just going to test the function and create the function to actually remove the periods from an address. And so the code I have here is I'm calling from our address object the function remove periods to this address. And we're going to then pass that variable to this new Boolean value. All this is doing here is it's seeing if this string includes a period. And we just inverse that because it shouldn't have any periods, so that this will turn into true. And then this is a more common assert statement. It just checks the two values that you pass as parameters and make sure that they are the same. In this case, we are asserting if this value that we just created is string with no periods, is that the same as a true Boolean? And then the third argument is just a little message that we can include on our tests so that we can pass helpful information such as this variable. In JavaScript, this is equivalent to the double equals. You could do a deep equal to make it a triple equals, which would obviously probably be the better choice. So now that we have that test written, we would go and actually program the logic to make this pass. Again, for time's sake, I have already done that and have added a simple function called remove periods where it accepts an address as a parameter, and then it goes through it with regex and it replaces any of the periods with nothing. So that should return true. Let's go back to our test file and see if that's the case. And it does. It would show an error if something went wrong with that test, but here's a test we called check for removed periods, and it has a little message that I gave with the variable saying, hey, it should have no periods, and it does. So I've gone on ahead and I programmed the next portion where I wanted to capitalize the east, south, and such. And I wrote this test to go and do that. It runs my function, make sure that those letters are included. Same similar syntax as before. And then I included the function to make that actually happen. And it actually works right now. And here's this test again. I'm not going into detail because we just looked at it prior, and it is showing that they were successfully capitalized. So at this point, my demo should work. So if we put in an arbitrary address, it should convert that, and does it remove the periods and capitalize everything. So again, the tests were there to help me make sure my functions work properly, and it'll also help me in the future when I make changes that the functions still act as they should. So that demo was just to give you a feel for some of the testing framework capabilities that QUnit has. There's a lot of other options and features that come with it. There's ways to check callback to make sure that the right amount were called. There are ways to check events and make sure things are triggered properly. So yeah, I would encourage you to take a closer look. It has some great documentation available. There's lots of other cool features like plugins that allow you to work with different things such as promises or canvas or other HTML features. Anyways, I hope that that was insightful and that will encourage you to use a testing framework with your JavaScript to make sure that you're writing good production code. Thanks so much.